and we are back. We are united by rice, where we talk about all things Asian, Native heritage, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander in entertainment and beyond. I'm Junko Goda, and one of the co-hosts, and I'm here with my co-host.
I'm Ben Lee, and it's great to talk to you, Junko. Today we're going to talk about, we're going to have a long interview with Glenn Kaino, who
Yeah,
has a really good short documentary called Hoops, Hopes, and Dreams. It's a really cool story
yeah,
telling really an unknown story and history of how Martin Luther King Jr. and many of his team of civil rights activists used to engage with locals through games of basketball to drive community activism. And Glenn will tell us a story
yep,
about how he even stumbled across this tidbit of history and started to dig into the information and eventually
yes,
connect that storyline all the way from Martin Luther King all the way to President Obama. So, really
yes,
cool
and
story.
yeah, and it's an animated documentary, so that makes it very unique as a
There are part,
documentary.
yeah, there's parts documentary because
Yeah.
unfortunately there is not real footage or existing footage anymore of Martin Luther King playing
Yeah.
basketball. So they filled it with actually very beautiful animation. So it's really cool stuff to see.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
can't wait to play that interview for everybody. But
Yep.
um, Junko, what's new in the world this week for you?
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, I think the biggest news, I guess, entertainment side would be the whole Netflix Warner acquisition attempt, and then was it the regulators coming in, and then Paramount coming in to make a bid.
Yes,
That's been a little
yes.
crazy. I And I think if you're a subscriber of Netflix, so I canceled my Netflix subscription, but I'm on till like a little later. But nonetheless, so and no one probably saw this email except maybe me. But apparently 2 days ago, so that'd be Monday, the day it was announced, not even before the whole possible hostile takeover conversation even started the next day. Monday night at was it 7:13 p.m. We all got an email that said from Netflix welcoming Warner Brothers to Netflix, and it goes like, "Hi Junko, we recently announced that Netflix will acquire Warner Brothers," and blah blah blah. So it was a very weird email. Nothing's finalized, but then they're sending these emails out, so they seem to know more, much more than we do with obviously the back dealings. But it was kind of, I don't know, a little suspect, I guess.
Well,
Jumping the gun.
I think it's how the world generally works in our new Trump world, where you just say things enough times and make it happen, maybe, right? Like,
Ah,
so I think it's a lot of posturing, right, between these
yeah,
really rich billionaires saying, yeah, we've done it, we're going to get it done. And then all of a sudden you've got the Ellisons coming back and saying,
yeah.
well,
Like,
we've got a better offer.
right. But as like a marketer, like what's the strategy behind like this kind of very more of a statement announcement when nothing is technically, set in
Yeah,
stone? Like
I
there's
mean,
like just a confidence?
I don't know if it's a marketing thing, right? I don't think this is tied to them trying to elevate their brand necessarily, other than maybe saying, we've got the guns, we are huge, we are all powerful, and maybe even a little bit of a tone of, and we're the best positioned to make this all happen. I don't, as you know, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners know, the kind of brushback is real, right? Like in a world where jobs and entertainment are already hard to come by, this just makes people
It'd
even
be
more nervous,
really
right?
bad. It'd be really
Yeah,
bad.
but I don't think Netflix looks at it that way, and they just say, "Hey, we know what we're doing, and we're gonna pull this together." And then, of course, you've got the other team, the Ellison team, coming in now and apparently pulling Jared Kushner and his
Hmm,
money and blood money into the mix to it's which of course is
interesting. Yeah.
obviously like as corrupt as it gets, right? Because now you're trying to do that to pull Trump's favor into,
Mm,
which deal might get blessed by
right,
the
right.
government. So it's nasty stuff. It's not stuff obviously that you and I spend a lot of time thinking about, but yeah, it is big news,
Yeah.
and
Well, I mean, I guess for me, like, I do think about it a lot because with these strikes, like, so many of my friends had to, like, just up and leave or move to different states and
yeah,
just jobs. It's huge. Like, our sound stages at the beginning of the year were empty, and they're usually, minimally a good portion are occupied by like commercials and industrials
sure,
and stuff like that. But it's been really bad. So that's definitely a big, big concern, like locally here
sure,
in the Los Angeles area.
of
So,
course,
yeah.
yeah, and this singular event doesn't necessarily reflect all the problems that are in the industry right now that has caused some
Yeah.
of that, right?
Yeah. It's not singular, but it has, it
It's
feels very
reflective, yes.
well, no, it's very cumulative.
Mm,
Right, because over the last 4 years, we've already gone through strikes, and of course, a lot of people are pissed off at SAG-AFTRA for striking when we did, um, and things like that, and just the timing. But
yeah,
it is getting cumulative, and this announcement is, it's an announcement, but also so many major sound stages like the Pine Woods in Atlanta. They already moved to the UK. They're moving outside of the country
sure,
already,
yep,
so
yep.
I think it's alarming locally. Yeah.
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 Well, again, there's elements of what the cost of doing business is in the US and in
Yeah.
LA as one issue, but obviously it's a little bit of a vicious cycle because you've got,
All right.
um, a business like Netflix, which who are notorious for, very limited theater runs, if any theater
Right.
runs. And so if
Yeah.
you've got that part of the business continue to die, right? Like, of course, it's
Yeah.
well talked about how poor, box office performance has been. Although there's been some hits, right? But
Yeah. There have
in
been hits,
general, it's
but like,
down.
yeah, I
Yeah,
think for example, I think I read an article about what some of the laws in France, and I guess to protect their like French film, like I guess maybe cultural heritage, like films are required to be in theaters for X amount of weeks. Like there's a
yeah,
certain guarantee.
yeah,
I guess once you're a certain film, and recognize that way, then you're
yeah,
guaranteed a theater run. And I think
well,
that protects the industry.
yeah. But not everybody. I think in the U.S. that range in terms of what some of the studios have kind of mandated is anywhere from a week or 10 days to like 3 weeks, right? It's very minimal.
Right.
Sean Baker did come out and say, Sean Baker, the
Yeah,
director
yeah.
producer of Anora last year, and he's got his hand in Left-Handed Girl this year. He did come out and say like he won't back a project or I guess sell a film to a studio that doesn't guarantee a minimum 100-day theatrical
Mm,
release. So,
there you go.
obviously people want to push against this, and I don't, and who knows, maybe a Netflix or if it ends up being Warner Brothers, Paramount, whoever, maybe they do come out and say something along those lines. It's like, don't
Mm,
worry, we're not trying to change the whole model. We just wanted some studios. Um,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
positive thinking, optimistic thinking, but you never know.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
I guess, since everything is it runs in cycles, like I guess one of these days, like Netflix will break apart, who knows how
yeah,
long down the road, but you know,
yeah,
if they get
yeah.
too bloated.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's something,
yeah.
yeah. But anyway, yeah. So go back to Glenn's interview.
Oh, sure. Well, I mean, we learned a lot. He's such an interesting guy, right? Because he's kind of this mixed artist,
Yeah,
multimedia, multi-genre type of artist that
yeah.
we don't normally seek out to interview. It only happens to be because he also directed a
Yeah,
film
yeah, short
in
film.
this
Yeah.
case, right?
Yeah.
Um, and then I love hoops. I love, the subject matter, so it was a very
Yeah.
easy
Cool.
project to want to talk about.
Yep.
and
Yeah.
it's a very cool interview. And I think timing wise, the clock might have started ticking yesterday. The
Hmm.
window is open for the
Ah.
documentary shorts nomination selection for I think the Oscars right now already.
Hmm.
So not to mention many other types of awards that have opened up. So I know that
Yeah.
they have those aspirations for this film, and check it out. It's I think he mentioned the film Hoops, Hopes, and Dreams is going to run um, on Hulu, I believe,
Yeah.
but part
Yeah.
of
Yeah. Starting next
Disney.
month. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, to coincide with Martin Luther King Day, of course.
Yeah.
So, yep. I wanted to chat with you about. I went to the No Other Choice premiere
Ah. Right. Right. Right.
last night at the Academy of Motion Pictures, or the Academy Museum of Motion
Oh,
Pictures.
museum. Okay.
First of all, have you been there?
Oh, yeah. 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 I've been there like a bazillion
Oh, sure.
times.
They
Yeah.
have they have many, many events there for union, SAG, all that type of stuff. But I don't
Mhm.
get to go there very often, and I still haven't
True.
been
Yeah.
there. I still haven't been there during open hours. I've only been
Oh,
there for
the museum.
events.
Right. Right. Right.
Yeah. But the theater is awesome. The David Geffen Theater, the
Yeah.
sound, and sometimes it feels like it's coming out of the seat next to you. I don't know how they do that, but it's really cool.
Yeah, that space. I was actually there. I got to tour the place while it was being built, but
Mm,
currently that theater is the most like it has Dolby Atmos. It's the most technologically advanced theater in
mm.
LA right now because it's brand new.
Yeah, sure. Well, No Other Choice is the new director Park Chan-wook film, which
Mm,
any film he does is pretty highly anticipated. Most famous maybe for films like Old Boy, or maybe that's at least the one that I cherish the most.
yeah.
And it's, I guess in many ways, your typical Korean drama film, a little bit of genre bending. It's very funny. It's a dark
Mm,
comedy, but a little bit of the
okay.
Parasite type of story where you've got a
Like
family that's
class
struggling.
wars, not class wars, but an examination about like
Some
society.
of that, yeah. And I don't want to
Okay.
give away, in particular, the
Yeah.
ending, because the ending is, I think, quite good. And I hope most people find it to be quite rewarding. Um,
Hmm.
but the lead character, the guy or the actor that super well known in Korea, maybe known
Yeah.
mostly here in the U.S. for I don't know. Would you
Snake
say
was
Squid?
he? Was he?
Would you say Squid Game is his
Well,
most
Squid
known
Game's
character?
now. Was
Well,
he in G.I. Joe before?
he was in G.I. Joe. So
Right?
yeah,
Okay, 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 okay.
if you go back many years, that's right. He was in
Snake Eyes, yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
GI Joe movies. Not Snake Eyes.
It wasn't Snake Eyes. No, no,
He
no.
plays
Something
the
else.
white
Yeah.
ninja, the white costume ninja.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
The
yeah, yeah.
oh boy, Storm
Windstorm?
Shadow, right? Is it
Storm
Storm Shadow?
Shadow. Oh, yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. Ooh,
yeah,
I know my G.I. Joe apparently.
yeah. Well, that's pretty good. I didn't necessarily know you would think you'd pull that one out of your hat because that goes back a
Well,
long
yeah.
way. But yeah, so to
Yeah.
your point, to Western audiences, sorry, we're talking about Lee Byung-hun. Um,
Yeah.
but I think to Western audiences, he's probably most known for being the front man in Squid Game.
Hmm. Right.
He also has a voice acting part as the kind of main villain in K-pop Demon Hunter. So he's having a little bit of a moment,
Right.
actually, I think, here in Western
Hmm.
audiences, and he's fantastic. He plays um, essentially a laid off uh, blue collar worker, and has come up with just kind of an incredibly morbid scheme to figure out how to get a job again, and all for the
Okay.
sake of maintaining his family's, lifestyle.
Mm.
And to your point, it's very much a class, what happens when you're, lower middle class family struggles, and
Mm.
what do they have to do? But
Yeah.
it's very on point to today's times. Again, I
Mm.
won't spoil the ending.
Yeah, yeah, of
Um,
course.
and then I'll tell you, I work a few red carpets here and there. Doing it for a Korean film is a different experience, Junko.
Mm.
Everyone is so polite.
Oh,
They
yeah, yeah,
come
yeah.
out
That's true.
early and give the journalists lots of time. it's not that last second
Mm,
scramble and fly by.
right, right.
Of course, they have people like you translating for them.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, anybody who's interacted with these two individuals, Director Park and Lee Byung-hun, I think know that they're really nice individuals and give a lot of time to their fans and press. And even in
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
after the screening, they also were spending a lot of time, a couple hours really, with people who wanted to take pictures with them and mingle with
Yeah,
them. So quite
that's
cool.
yeah, yeah. It's the time
Yeah,
to do it. It's the time to do it.
yeah.
All
So I
right.
will process the film. I'll write a review for everybody listening. I'll give you a sneak that I think it's probably in my top 5 films right now of the year. It will
Oh,
be a
okay.
definite award contender.
Mm.
Although the foreign film lineup is strong, so even though I say it's one of my top 5, I'm not even sure it's going to win best foreign film. So, you
Yeah, I
know,
don't know. We're all kind of waiting for the short list next week, and
yeah,
we'll
exactly,
see. We'll see. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
exactly.
Okay, cool.
All right. Well, if nothing else, Junko, we can turn it
Yeah.
over to our interview with Glenn Kaino. As always, please follow us on United by Rice Podcasts. That's our Instagram handle. You can also find our podcast on iHeartRadio, YouTube, and of course Spotify. And I actually think we have our next episode recorded. So in a few days, look forward for our next episode with Su Chan,
Mm.
who was the production designer for a really fun show on Apple TV called Murderbot. And
Yeah.
with that, cheers everyone, and thank you for listening.
And we are back here with Glenn Kaino. Again, we are United by Rice. I'm Junko Goda, and I'm here with my co-host.
Yeah, this is Ben Lee, and we're very excited to talk to Glenn. Glenn, I'm a huge basketball fan. I don't know, Junko, if you are quite as big of a basketball fan.
Probably not as big.
Um, but when I saw the just the title of the film, I was already intrigued, and then I saw some of obviously the log line, and then saw that you were directing it. So now I'm all in, and am excited to talk to you about it. But since we have the time, I'd love to just your background is very interesting. It's not your Wikipedia doesn't sound like your traditional filmmaker. So I'd love to kind of learn more about your journey through the arts, what inspires you, and then ultimately how you started to get into filmmaking.
Yeah. And also, like Glenn, I figure at like a social setting, people come and like, so what do you do? And I think Wikipedia just has you as like a filmmaker. I'm like, I don't think that's it.
Yeah, how
Uh,
do you
So someone
self-describe
who doesn't
yourself?
know
Yeah.
you at all, like, how do you give them the package?
well, there's two answers to that are funny. One, so, personally, with my friends and my wife and my family, they say, "What do you?" My wife would say, like, "My friends always ask, what do you do?" And I said, "I don't know what I do, but I just don't want to lose my job." No, but I think that for externally, my entire body of work, for me as art practice is an art practice.
Mm,
The filmmaking is part of the art practice, and everything comes out of art. And to dive, a bit back into the background, I'd say when I got out, I went to UC. Well, so I grew up in a small suburb called Cerritos. Got kicked out of a bunch of high schools. Went to UC Irvine for undergrad. And this all comes back into filmmaking and storytelling. So there's a purpose for
mm,
sharing that. And went to UC Irvine for undergrad and UC San Diego for grad school. And when I got out of grad school, it was right post an era called the Culture Wars.
Cool.
It was in the mid '90s, and the world offered me some binaries. They were like, you could do art or you could do media. You can't do both. And I said, why do I have to choose? And in the art world, really the curator class and the collector class, they were like, you could do politics or you could do beauty. You can't do both. And I was like, well, I sort of reject all those classifications, and I'm gonna create a small studio that has the vision to like explore difficult ideas through about the world through art, because I still believe art is one of the last places, not commercial galleries, but just the field of art is where you can actually explore difficult ideas with the ROI or the KPI, whatever is, did you imagine a better world? And most other
Wait,
parts of the
back
world,
up. What's the ROI again? I'm not.
like a return on investment, like
Oh,
the
thank
value,
you. Thank
the
you.
value of your time, the value of your
Okay.
time is like, did you do a good job thinking about the world,
Yeah. I'm
right?
in
The
the
value
art
of your
world
time
and
is not
not
like,
business. So I'm like, what's
yeah,
ROI?
yeah.
Okay.
The value of art is not like how much money and time did you spend and how much return am I going to get economically. That's sort of
Mm.
like,
Yeah.
again, there are formats for that which are great, but generally speaking, art is the last place where you go into the studio and you think, and you get
Mhm.
inspired and you experience the world and you catalyze your experiences, to hopefully make a proposition or an observation that contributes to like the fabric of who we are and the understanding of who we are as people. But sometimes when I've done that, some of the works I felt deserve bigger publics, in a way.
Mhm.
Because it's like, oh my God, that's a really big thing. And for that, then I started to make films and make other types of theatrical performances and things. And so, again, started this years ago. And then throughout I also understood very early in my career, I had really great mentors that if I was going to do something in the pop cultural sort of field or experiment in media, let's say, that, um, it has to be great, and I say that because one thing that irritated me growing up was as a younger artist was people would say like, in the video art world. There's this, oh, I want to make really big videos and art ideas, and we're going to go compete with all these like big films, and you know, might have had really sincere, great ideas, but the quality of the product, that they were making weren't commercial, and so I was with a bunch of frustrated filmmakers for a lot of years early on in my career. A lot of them Asian, a lot of them filmmakers of
Mm-hmm.
color, and they're like,
Mhm.
oh, like
Yeah.
like this sucks. No one's watching our films. It's like, well, they're not that great. I'm your friend. I'm your friend, and they're not that great.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll watch them, and art audiences will watch them, but like this disconnect between the notion of like actual pop cultural engagement at a mass scale with some
Mm.
of the ideas. And for me, that disconnect is not all hard ideas are easily translatable
Mm.
into ideas. Like the compromise that one has to make in order to appeal to a general audience is like pretty big. And
Yeah.
so for me, these lives were kind of like growing parallel in sort of secret from each other. And so, I was in the 2004 Whitney Biennial while I was
Mm-hmm.
the chief creative officer of Napster, or
Mhm.
I was working with Oprah Winfrey for 11 years, and
Right.
I was selected by the United States to represent the country in the Cairo Biennale. And so,
Right.
I'm in Cairo with scholars talking about global revolution. And then I got to fly back home and I was like, hey, Oprah, I got selected to represent the United States in the Cairo Biennale. And Oprah was like, what does that mean? And so it's like the Olympics. It's like the Olympics for
Yeah.
art, but they choose an artist, and it's me this year. And she goes, "Give me a hug! I just won an Oscar this morning." you know,
Yeah.
but those things were very separate. And then I had done a lot
Mm.
of work with the idea of knowing and not knowing, secrecy, with a really good friend of mine named Derek Delgadio, and we did performance artworks around the world, around the country, and that
Mm.
catalyzed into a theatrical performance that we made for Derek called In and of Itself, and then we made a movie, and that was like a big hit on Hulu. Um,
Yeah.
I did work with an African American athlete activist named Tommy Smith, who in
Mhm.
Right.
1968 did the Salute. We spent 13 years together working on projects, and we have a massive installation at the Smithsonian. And
Mhm.
like the making of that artwork, it ended up being a film on Stars and
Mm-hmm.
another network called Bounce. It was great. And so, throughout those moments, we're like, okay, this story of Tommy is going to make its way through, I think, 6 museums. We had shows at Studio Museum of Harlem, and but like even with all the collective attendance of the Leon Biennial, Studio Museum of Harlem, High Museum of Atlanta, San Jose Museum of Art, Smithsonian, all that doesn't compare to like the run we got at Stars,
Mm.
Yeah.
with
Mm-hmm.
the film, because just like
Right.
the audiences are also very different. And so
Yeah.
that's what inspired me to begin to incorporate film work into the practice
Mm-hmm.
as a way of like um, connecting
Sure.
works together. And all
Yeah.
of my works are like um, ecosystems of
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
ideas, and they're not
Yeah.
like an artwork. An artwork
Yeah.
is like an idea, and the idea
Right.
manifests across form.
Mm. Now,
The
I'm like, I had a quick. Is there? I'm like, who wants to ask a question first? Now
Go
we're
ahead,
battling it out.
Jacob. Yeah.
I want to back up a little bit to your Culture Wars days. It sounds like that was a big influence on because Culture War days. You were still a student in grad school. Is that about right?
I was an undergrad and grad, yeah.
Oh, okay. So, just contextually, what was going on in Southern California, like UCSD, was that about like Asian American Studies was just a few years old at that point? Is
Oh
that
yeah,
correct?
yeah, yeah. Lisa Lowe was one of my grad professors. But
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
that what was happening globally
Uh,
was that the NEA was under attack. It was so when I was in high school, and we're like
yeah,
when I was in high school, there were like the Tipper Gore hearings about rock
yeah.
music and
Mm-hmm.
rap and whatnot,
Right.
and then the NEA four with Karen Finley and Ron Athey. You know, there was an attack on
Yeah,
civil cultural liberties in terms
yeah.
of
Sure.
what expression meant,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, in comparison to now, that is like you know, docile compared to
Yeah,
Yes. Yeah.
the sorry
yeah.
what it's sounding now, but it was happening, and unlike now, the fact that he was the fact that that was even happening
Mm,
became itself a very legitimate public dialogue
Mm-hmm.
around the opportunity that artists
mm.
had. And for me, growing up, also back to the early days, without any Asian American representation in culture at all,
Right,
except for
right.
negative ones. You know,
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I guess
Long Duck Dong.
Giant Robot
Yeah.
was on the rise. They were like,
So Giant Robot. I have been a fan of Eric since like I have the Giant Robot one, the zine.
nice.
Ah.
Yeah,
I drove to UCLA with a friend,
yeah,
and we went to go. Eric had a little stand, I think, at some of the book, whatever. And
yeah,
I remember buying Giant Robot number one, a zine that was Xerox folded, and
yep,
I have Giant Robot one through
yeah.
four, I think, the zines.
That's
Nice.
like
And
that's
then
like
when
your retirement plan right there.
do they are those worth something? Because
I think those things have
No.
some value. I don't know.
I'll
I'm
put them on
guessing.
I'll put them up on Asian eBay.
You'll have to ask Eric.
Yeah.
No, I'm a huge fan. I mean, when Eric did that,
Yeah.
I was like, this is the best thing ever. And then
Yeah,
that
yeah.
graduated to like a magazine,
Right.
it was like, oh.
I
Yeah.
figured there was some sort of intersectionality between you, like, forming yourself and like Giant Robot, like Asian American Studies happening on the West Coast. There were just like local,
Yeah.
SoCal specific things that were also like stimulating your process. So
Yeah,
that's
I mean,
cool.
Eric was the cool. I mean, Eric, I was not the cool one. Eric was the cool one. I
Cool.
mean, like because Eric was, I think, like because there were a few other Asian American magazines before Eric, but Eric
Yeah.
had such a swagger. Giant Robot had swag,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
in that, like the other Asian American magazines before Eric's were just like
Ghidra?
like I say
But that was all
There,
social
there was
activism.
there was one called Yoke. There was one called Yoke.
Yes,
Yeah.
I remember
Yeah.
Yoke.
You know?
Yeah.
They've
And, like,
come back, you know. They
oh,
actually have
I mean,
started a
A podcast, I think. Yeah.
I mean, good for them. They were just
Yeah.
really earnest.
Yeah.
Right, and
Yeah.
like, you know, honestly, it was a lot different than like growing up with like racist Asian caricatures, but it wasn't like cool,
Yeah.
Yes.
you know. And then
Yeah.
you know, Eric was punk, you know, with Martin,
Yeah.
and like and they were just those like Eric was just like, oh, like this is like I found my tribe, like Eric's,
Yeah.
you know, and I was like
Yeah.
a kid, you know, I was like an undergrad.
Yeah.
And he was already like, I think he's, you know, I don't know if he's
A
older
little
than me,
bit.
but he's
Yeah,
like,
maybe 4 or 5
you know,
years.
whatever.
Maybe something like that.
But I remember going, oh man, you know,
Yeah.
Yeah.
so
See, we have to ask the proverbial question. I know you're, if Wikipedia is correct, fourth generation Japanese American, but
first
where
of all,
you're
sorry to cut you off, but I have not looked at the Wikipedia, but
okay. Well,
I
so
didn't
you
even know
could
that.
you could
But I'm
fact
fourth.
check, but
Yeah.
yeah. So, but parents, maybe then not necessarily Tiger Asian parents. Where were they in support of your pursuit of the arts versus more traditional professions that are deemed more appropriate for
Unless your family
Asian
was
Americans?
already artists anyway to begin with.
Yeah.
No, they're not artists at all, actually. I would say this. First of all, my parents are super supportive, and they're great, you know, but you know, growing up, certainly they did not understand that art. I mean, none of us like art wasn't a job back then.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
art
yeah.
was like something that you did when it was there was no art world in terms of a
Yeah.
commercial
Mhm.
sort of system didn't exist. You know, but when I went through sort of my coming of age, and through you know affiliation with like Asian gangs and street violence and whatnot, but when I sort of extracted myself from that world, my parents were like, whatever you want to do, and actually
Anything but that.
my mom actually bought me my first art magazine,
Oh.
Huh.
and it was a Flash art magazine, and it's so wild. Damien Hirst was on the cover, and I was like, this is art. And I remember immediately being attracted to the concept of ideas as art, and then as a way to help me sort of straighten out my life, they would drive me to art center for summer classes, and so they've been very supportive, sort of blindly, after, which just like, I wasn't going to be in jail or in the hospital, and art is better. But even as a kid, I would say, going full back to young childhood, I would make my own toys, and the concept that I cite often is called kit bashing, and it's KITBASHING, and it's using a model kit without instructions. And I realized, I did that as a young kid. Like, we'd have like GI Joes or Voltrons or whatever, and other kids would be able to have all the tanks and lions, and I just have to make mine. We could afford a couple, but then and it was like, oh, your tank is shitty because it's made out of cardboard, and then eventually the kids were like, oh, your tank is dope because it's made out of cardboard.
Yeah.
I would be able to go to like the military history books and build tanks out of cardboard that didn't exist in the store, and then kids were like, oh, like that's cool over there. And there's actually another older kid who kind of helped teach me all that stuff.
So you were that kid from Toy Story 2 with all the toys that had like the heads and the bodies. Everything's kit bashed.
Yeah, exactly.
Toy Story 2.
Exactly. I think that if he's like the crazy villain, all that except for the villainy.
Yeah.
Well, I'd love to hear, kind of the spark and getting into Hoops, Hopes, and Dreams. Even before the concept of the film, what's your relationship to basketball? Is that something that was a love of yours growing up?
Oh yeah. So we're on a Zoom or a Riverside full of Asians. So I played in the Asian league and the Japanese league.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
And so Sale. I was terrible. And I over the course of years, I earned my way up to a sort of, starting forward position. But our team was terrible. We had like 6 people, so it didn't mean much. One guy got hurt, and I was starting. But I loved it. And
how tall are you, Glenn?
Oh, I'm like 5'9".
Okay, same. So I'm 6 feet, but just like you, in Asian leagues, I would have to play like power forward or center, because when you said small forward, I'm like, oh, you might be pretty tall.
Yeah, no. I was like, so I'm 5'9", and not tall. But I always loved it. And then always been a big fan. And even when I was like working in music and art, I'd create 3-on-3 leagues for, our friends. And then on undergrad, I created the, UC Irvine basketball art league or whatever. And we were just always into basketball, and I've done a lot of sports and basketball related projects. So basketball, anyway, long story is big love for basketball. I actually grew up as a Lakers household.
Sure.
I ended up making I made the monument for in front of the new Intuit Dome for the Clippers stadium. I've done a lot of work with the Clippers, and I love that organization.
So do you change hats, like Clippers, Lakers, whoever, depending
on
who you're talking to?
Look, I love the Clippers. They know that, but they know that when I take off my shirt, it's a Lakers jersey underneath. No, I grew up with my parents like Magic and Kareem, and I'm a Lakers ticket holder. I love
nice.
I love the Lakers, and so so I'm a huge basketball fan, and as is a lot of my team. And so the origin story of Hoops is that I was working with I've been working with Tommy Smith, as I mentioned, and with Tommy, we just like I described, like the work is not just like the one artwork in the Smithsonian. It's a lot of smaller conceptual things we've done. It's really very private things we've done together, like
Mm.
I was able to help introduce him to Colin Kaepernick.
Mm,
Our team got him over to the Obama White House, and we
mm.
Mm.
got to hang with the president. And
Yeah,
our president. And
Yes.
but one of the things my team also did is we helped launch his foundation.
Mm.
Mm,
And so every year there's like a foundation gala, and I make the little award. It's a little
mm,
Oh, nice.
mini
Yeah,
version
yeah.
of the bridge, and it's
Yeah, yeah,
one
yeah.
second arm, and
Right.
and
mhm,
um and I go to the gala just when I can, and a few years back, 3 or 4 years ago, I was sitting there and I made the award, and the honoree was Ambassador Andrew Young, and
okay.
I have probably interviewed maybe 50 people with Tommy. 60. I've had a lot of chances to interview Tommy with someone else or be in
Mhm,
conversation, and just sometimes on camera, sometimes not, and it always cracks me up that no matter who we're talking to, people want to show off to Tommy how great they were at athletics. And it's like, and it's like, I get it's like a way to connect. You know what I mean?
yeah.
But Tommy broke 13 world records.
Yeah.
He's the guy. But everyone does that. And Andrew Young was no exception. So Andrew gets on stage at this gala, and you imagine me, I'm the Asian guy in the back of the Atlanta gala, and eating the food, and Andrew Young gets up, and Ambassador Young, and he says, "Tommy, did I ever tell you how good I am at basketball?" And Tommy was like, "No, please." And Ambassador Young says, "Well, Dr. King and I used to play basketball to connect with kids in the movement." I literally dropped my fork. I looked around as if,
Right.
did anyone hear this? Like,
Yeah.
everyone's acting like this is like known information. What are you talking about? And I jumped
Mm.
out of my chair. I ambushed him in the parking lot, and like literally, he's getting wheeled out in his wheelchair with his team, and I jump in front of him and I say, "Ambassador Young, my name is Glenn Kaino. I made that award in your hand. I work with Tommy. Like, can I tell that story on film?" And Ambassador Young says, "I love Tommy. I love basketball. Yeah, let's do it." And the first phone call I made from there was to my producing partner, Michael Latt, who
Mhm,
was unfortunately killed in the process of making this film. But
mhm.
I called Michael, and we were off to the races. And that's sort of how the whole thing began.
Mm.
It's an amazing story because to your point, and I think it's kind of proven out in the film. There's like no footage, there's no photos of this ever happening, right? So like to hear, wait, they were playing basketball on the streets and Dr. King played basketball. You always, the only image I have of Dr. King is, white shirt, tie, suit, right? So it's such a cool story to unpack. I we'll come back to Michael because I'm sure you'd love to spend a minute talking about him and the
Absolutely.
contributions he made to your life and to the film. But in starting to unpack this story, you how it's 2020s. I assume you started the process in the last few years of making this film. There aren't that many people around still from that era. Like where did you find, like, how did you source the stories, how did you source the material, and who did you end up being able to connect with that uh, really gave you enough to turn this into a film?
Well, I mean, the first thing we did is we did a pretty extensive interview with Ambassador Young,
Sure.
who really, we spent like hours, 3 or 4 hours with him, and really gave us the whole context of the early phases of the movement, and not only just the camaraderie, but really like the sort of deeply personal, sort of moments that are not often talked about regarding, Dr. King and his relationship to the community, but also his team.
Sure.
At the end, there's a bit about how he, made them, feel at ease about death and whatnot. There's a whole really great little moment. Have you guys watched the film?
Well, so Junko has not.
Okay.
Mm.
We got the screener and it was time whatever, there was an
Oh,
There's an
expiration date.
expiration. It
Yeah.
okay.
expired. I got it
Yeah.
Okay.
while
So
I was in Japan, so I was like, I
Okay.
can't
yeah.
watch it.
We'll get you a screener. We'll get you a screener.
Yeah, we'll get it
But
back.
yeah, so there are very personal moments. So Andrew Young sort of set the context for that,
Yeah.
and then to the point, it's really it's funny that you asked that because a lot of about the photo. A lot of documentary filmmakers were like, "How did you even decide to commit to telling that story without the photo?"
Right.
And I said, "Isn't that what all artists do? Like, you don't have the thing, you just go make it." And they're like, "No." And like a lot of documentary filmmakers, like they make sure that there is enough backup material in order to faithfully tell the story.
Right.
And
Sure.
I said, well, maybe that's like a good example of me as an artist, and the belief system I have in just like the of making a project. But I always also knew that I had this my friend and collaborator Kirill Uretsky, our
Mm.
animator.
Mm-hmm.
I have a long-term partnership working with him on animation projects, and one of the things I knew about Kirill from the day I sat down with Ambassador Young with me and Michael is that like he loves basketball, he's obsessed with basketball, and
Mm.
when the Kobe animation film came out, he said to me, he
Uh-huh.
says, "If you ever have a basketball film, let me know. We'll make a great one." And I said, "Okay, I know that we have a great team that would make the animation like look amazing." And we've gotten a tremendous amount of positive feedback on that
Yes.
animation, and it's all Kirill, and so with that,
Mm.
with the confidence of knowing that I had him, as a teammate, and this whole thing is like all sort of team driven. Um,
Mm-hmm.
we went and pursued the story. I will say we then, so Michael, one of the first things we did was build a team, and we brought in, he had met a woman named Alexis Feaster, who's now a
Uh-huh.
good friend and
Mm-hmm.
one of our producers. And Michael says, I met this woman, and she has to be part of the project. She's great. I trust you. You're the producer. And he says, no. She spent 10 years, at the NBA, and she was in Obama's White House as the head of athlete engagement for years. And I was like, oh yeah,
Perfect.
Yeah.
perfect, And so
Yeah.
with Alexis's help, we ended up actually interviewing,
Mm.
NBA All Star, like a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people that didn't
The
make it
Sure.
into the
access.
film,
Yeah. Yeah.
but they gave us not only, again, it's like a lot of this stuff is confidence building. They gave us the confidence that we had material, and we had this much material, and we made a film that was like really polished, because we could,
Mm.
we're throwing away clips from NBA All Stars who are so
Sure.
generous to give us time. But we're like, okay,
Yeah.
well, we know that like this scene is important. If we're gonna sacrifice this for this, and
Right.
so, and then what we did is we always knew that President Obama was an athlete, and was
Mm-hmm.
basketball particularly was something that when he was in office, I remember being really excited about him playing basketball. And
Mm-hmm.
so, Michael Strautmanis and Reggie Love were friends of Michael Strautmanis, a friend of mine, and Alexis knew them both really well. And so we were able to get them to sit down and really tell the stories. And so then we had both of their wingman, both of our main subjects, Martin Luther King and President Obama. We had this great, sort of
Mm.
parallel
Mm-hmm.
of storytelling, and a way to connect them. And what we thought about the film, and what I always have thought for the last 15 years, watching athletes use their voice, like LeBron James and a lot of great athletes fighting for cause-based initiatives and things that they care about, and seeing the membrane and the boundary of how the world accepts that or not. I thought
Mm-hmm.
this film is like a missing link between that,
Mm.
because it's easy to say shut up and dribble when you don't think that there's a precedent, but when you
Sure.
understand that Martin Luther King dribbled, there's no
Yeah.
more shut
Yeah.
up and dribble if Martin
Yeah.
Luther King dribbled.
Yes.
And so we were really, we're like to say that our film is like the colored pages in the middle of the black and white history book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Where it's like all this stuff is like really important, but you sometimes as a kid you get to the middle and you say, what is this about?
Yeah.
And it gives you
Right.
an access point.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you that question because a lot of athletes today are either criticized for not being more vocal about social justice, civil rights, etc. And then oftentimes when athletes do speak up, or celebrities speak up for anything that could be seen as political, they're hugely criticized. Like,
Yeah.
what did you learn through this process, and in talking to a lot of the different NBA players about kind of their willingness or fear of being more involved in social justice
Well, I think that
or
a lot.
similar
First of all,
topics?
I think that one of the things that is that people don't, on both sides of the um, conversation, and by that I mean the ones that are outspoken and the ones that choose not to speak up.
Mm-hmm.
You know, on both sides of that criticism, there is a deep lack of understanding of the ecosystem of an athlete's career and a sensitivity to their actual power, right? And so by that I mean, you know, a lot of the younger folks in the league who have not yet made generational wealth, you know, who are fighting every day to stay in the league, you know, in the young ones, it's like, oh, you have a platform, why don't you use it? And the level of like consideration they have is pretty complex. You know, they have families to take care of. You know, again, they have their own contracts. They have a lot of things to deal with. You know, and fundamentally, they've spent their entire lives on the court learning how to perform to the best level, you know, of athletic prowess. You know, and they haven't sat in a room thinking about political strategy. You know, throughout their careers, and you know, so for that, the sensitivity that we were able to hear from a lot of the athletes was like, oh, you know, I mean, that makes sense, you know, and there's a lot of, I think, unjust criticism of athletes like not using their voice. Now, that being said, for the ones that have made it and are using the voice, you know, there are another set of complications, you know, arise as well. You know, and again, that's where we think that hopefully this project begins to create an interface, because and a historical platform, you know, for athletes, you know, to rely on, you know, in regards to, again, even just the confidence building and justification of how community works, right?
Yeah,
So
that's very true.
I think a lot of the big athletes who will say something, you know, they end up getting put on an island, right? Like the press attacks them, you know, and other athletes like look up to them. There's a little bit of tension because like, I can't say that, I want to say that, but like you're saying that, but you're already rich, you know? And so a lot of like the LeBron or whatever, you know, they get put on an island with their teams, and next thing you know, like the world sort of begins to think of them on an island, and it's like, no, they're actually just leaders of a community. And for us to understand that, like with King, it went the opposite way, right? Like he's a politician that or an activist and an organizer. Now people think of in a suit, they think of him in a room, they think of him leading marches, and they don't think of him on the court, you know. And so anyway, that's where we think we can hopefully, you know,
definitely
inspire.
And you mentioned an athlete that I don't know, I think a lot of people would perceive like this is the reason why I don't want to be overly vocal, like Colin Kaepernick, right? It didn't work well for his career. I mean, he might, I don't know if you've talked to him, maybe he's happy, maybe he has no regrets, and the work he's doing as an activist is still meaningful. But from an outsider perspective, as just a sports fan, you'd say, oh, that hurt him, right? And it was a Tommy Smith moment. It was nothing more than that, really, right? So,
I mean, it's the same thing with Tommy. Tommy's career was over after the 68 Olympics. He could have won more medals. Tommy's time at the 19.83 seconds, I think, I might be a little bit out of date now because it's been a few years, but I think he would have gotten silver or above in 8 other games since Tommy, which is like wild. Like that's the time he set in 68, and it's still fast enough for silver or above in multiple Olympics after, right? I think all of that is like a reckoning for Colin and for Tommy in that, like, as athletes, like their passion is to be in competition. You know, I think it takes a minute for them to, and I don't know if it ever, I've never been a world-class athlete, you know, but I can only imagine from my proximity and conversations that at some point there is a realization that the contributions that they've made to the world eclipse that of the contributions they had already made on the court or the field or on the track, you know. But I don't know if they ever lose the desire to be on the field or on the track.
Right.
Sure.
Yeah.
Ever.
Yeah.
You know?
I hope,
competitor. Yeah.
And I hope, like, you know, like Mamiko Otani gets her hands on the short film, because I think as Angelinos, we're kind of waiting what kind of moves Otani Foundation, the Otani system now will work. We're kind of Yeah,
Make that
he's
happen.
only.
You guys can make that happen.
I'll try.
Junko, I don't like it when you talk about the Dodgers. You know this already.
But it is something like we're
Are you a
really,
Jays?
really curious.
I'm
you
a
a Jays fan?
Giants. I'm a Giants fan.
Oh,
I'm up in San
he's
Francisco.
San Francisco.
Yeah. Glenn, the film. So I want to probe a little bit on the comment you made around. Hopefully, this film, kind of unlocks or gives permission in some ways for athletes to feel like they can be more vocal because they can see now, hey, MLK, Obama, these figures in history have your back in some ways, right? But what else has to happen? Like, is there, in working with the Obama Foundation and the Obamas through this film, what else? I mean, this is obviously a very loaded question, but has to happen for, we're in a crazy, time right now. You probably didn't know that when you were making the film, how crazy it was going to be. What can athletes do? What can notable, Black figures do in this crazy world we're in to truly feel safe in raising their voice?
Yeah, I will say that we did not work directly with the Obama Foundation before in the production of the film. They're very aware of it and excited about it now. We worked with members, Mike Chapmanis,
sure.
but look, I think that I'm not in position to give advice to Black Americans or athletes. I think that what we're trying to do is just put forth a historical context of community that allows and hopefully inspires multiple people to assemble with the confidence that any activity that we put forth, is a team forward activity. And what we wanted to do is highlight the fact that our leaders, the people that inspired us the most, also we're part of like we're humans just like us, and we're part of teams as well. And one of the things that I've been saying is not only a lot of people say like, oh, your film is great, it brings our leaders down to our level, which is true, but I also have been saying hopefully also it paints the path for us to aspire to their level as well, because we're all just on the court, in a way, and the court is metaphoric, for political activity, community activity. But I think the most important one of the the ideas that we tried to put forth, is that everyone has a role, and it's always they're always evolving and changing, and so again, I'm glad that you asked the question about the players early, because again, one thing I definitely know is that we as audience members, because I just we watch Sports Center and see them on screen and
Sure.
whatnot, and read the press, it's like it is a very complex level of expectations that every player has, from the rookie who's on the bench to the star player, and there it's so individual, because we've spent really deep time with some great players who have had and I'm never double negative. I'm never not surprised at how complex these issues are that they're all contending with. And so I don't feel like our job and the film's job is to unpack that or to give guidance on how to accomplish that. What I do hope is that just by having people, including players, understand that as a community strategy, someone as important as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., humbled himself, put himself on the court, use that as a community tool to be relatable, just by knowing that as Andrew Young says in the film, like just by knowing Dr. King could play the other game makes them listen, by knowing Dr. King played the game might also make them listen to LeBron James. That's the only little part that I think, we're trying to like step in and we're not trying to overstep or overrepresent like the film's contribution to history at all. King scholars have said, oh, this is a very small part of, this is the greatest sort of thing for me. Like the King scholars have been like, oh, it's not a really important part of Dr. King's, body of work. right? This is
Yeah.
like what we were told early on. And
Yeah.
last week, or just a few days ago, we got to sit down with Dr. Bernice A. King, Martin Luther King Jr.'s daughter, and she was like, "I'm so excited that we're bringing this to the public as a very important part of like my dad's organizing strategy." And it was like, "Okay, great." So
Yeah.
this is the subjectivity of the world, right? Like
Yeah.
people who are really invested in all the different nuance of like Dr. King's body work, great. There's like, oh, that basketball thing didn't matter,
Yeah.
Right.
but like, Bernice A. King was like, I shoot lefty too, and
Yeah,
she
I think
plays
as
basketball.
artists, that's what we look for. We're not looking for a specific audience. You just want to make sure that like 6-year-old connects in that moment and carries
Yeah.
it for the rest of their lives. And I think as artists, that is like where the fulfillment line is.
Yeah.
Boom.
And this is like grassroots and community building. That's an easy takeaway, right? And that we just saw it in New York. What happens when you have a good grassroots campaign? Like a lot of good can happen. We want to give you the moment to talk about Michael and his contribution to the film. We're very sorry for the loss, of course. In interviews I've seen previous to this discussion, it sounds like he really connected a lot of the people that worked on the film together.
Yeah, no, Michael, we call him our point guard, and I still believe, I was just drafting an email this morning to one of our advisors, and I said, Michael, not only did he helped build the team in the beginning and got us all started, throughout this really magical journey of the last year after we finished, a lot of great things have happened, and I attribute them directly to Michael's spirit and to him being around. Funnily, a few stories that I love telling is, when we first started working, Michael and I were looking for a project to work on together. To give a bit of background to your viewers, Michael, his name was Michael Latt. His organization was called Lead with Love. You can find out more on Michael Latt Legacy Foundation. You can sort of search for that online. We have a foundation set up in his honor. But Michael got his start as an organizer, helping the justice campaigns for filmmakers and for artists, and he really championed primarily women and artists of color. He started out helping Ryan Coogler with Fruitville Station. He then began to help Common with prison reform concepts and bringing Common to prisons to think about prison reform. And he worked with Ava DuVernay and like a bunch of people, and he was really great. But he had not been a producer, even though he comes from a family of people who were making movies and whatnot. And so I was like, "You're great." And we were trying to. He was a partner in my studio and a big part of a lot of projects that we've got going on, and an anchor, so when I found this project, we got started, and Michael, as I mentioned, brought in Alexis and a bunch of other people, Dee Watkins, Joshua Dubois, a lot of our executive producers, and the first thing after putting the team together, so we had this like great team on paper. You got to start raising money, right?
Right.
I remember I love this. I was installing a show at the Japanese American National Museum,
That was Hockey's
it was
Marketplace.
Hockey's Market, yeah.
Yeah.
It was a windy day, and we get on. Michael had set up a call with some fundraising people, and we get on the call, and the first thing the woman says is, "We love this idea, but we don't have any money, and so." But we love to support you in any way, and I'm sure you hear that as artists. Like everyone always says that, and so I'm like, it's getting really windy. I'm losing connection. Michael, can you finish this call? And I just like hang up, and I go back in the museum, and I finish the installation day or whatever. Call Michael like 4 hours later, and I said, "Hey, how did that call finish up, man? Thank you so much. I mean, sorry, I had to go install because like the woman didn't have any money." And Michael says, "Oh no, it's fine. We got the money." I said, hold on. I literally heard her say the words, "I have no money." And he goes, "I know what she said, Glenn, but I got the money." And I was like, that's wild. 2 days later, we're on another Zoom follow up. And then 4 days later, we were funded and got the film started. And everything about not only the production of the process of the project, but like even Michael was unfortunately killed, which, was a tragedy. We debuted at Sundance, and I don't know if I told the story, but this is how I believe Michael, has led us the whole way. We debuted at Sundance. I'm getting dressed in the morning for our, sort of short film program, whatever debut. And my phone, I see a text from my phone, and it's one of Michael's good friends, and it just says, "Pick up the phone." And Tanya, if you're watching this, I don't know Tanya well enough for someone to just say, "Pick up your phone" with not a lot of extra flourishes.
Yeah.
And so I was like, because I don't know you so well, but it's like an order. I pick up my phone and I pick up the phone, and it was Marcia Cook from ESPN. She goes, "Glenn, this is Marcia Cook from ESPN, and we love this film." And she says, I'm with Tanya. We're just having coffee, and she just put it on while she's getting dressed, and I love it. I'm at the point where Jerry West is talking, and I said, if you're at Jerry West, call me back in 6 minutes, and I hung up on her. And she calls me back in 7 minutes, and she's like, "Okay, now I'm emotional. Don't ever hang up on me again." But how do we start working together, and how can we have this film? And Marcia's enthusiasm from that, and so it's one of the things where Tanya was very good friends with Michael. She just put the film on over a coffee to her good friend Marcia, who happens to be the head of ESPN Films, who happens to then come to our lunch, who happens to know everyone in the room, and again, everything that has been this film has been blessed, has been about community.
Yeah.
And it's really been about Michael's community, and you said early on of this that even the complexion of my studio and everything has changed for the better since knowing him. And so thank you for letting me just speak a bit about him.
Yeah,
so.
definitely.
Of course,
definitely want to remember who he is. And,
Yeah. And okay, so the film is called Hoops, Hopes, and Dreams. I'm not even sure we've said that yet. When will the general public be able to see this?
January 19th, 2026, Martin Luther King Jr. Day.
Yay.
On Hulu.
Awesome.
Hulu.
Streaming on Hulu. Perfect.
Streaming on Hulu.
We're very excited to see it, or for the general public to see it. Junko's very excited to see it as well. And it's tremendous. The animation, like you said, I think people forget that Kobe won an Oscar, right? So kind of separate anecdote, but the animation's a lot of fun. Did you ever have a couple last questions? Did you ever tempted to make this a longer feature, given how much footage you ultimately did capture?
I would say yes. Michael and I we had several different options. The film that you've seen and the film that we have is the film that Michael and I we distinctly had finished together. And so I wanted to make sure that we honored that. And I think that the film that we have made is the film that honors everything that Michael and I started.
Perfect.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And then I guess, I have to ask, if you were able to surmise enough of Dr. King's hoop skills, who would win in a game of horse between him and Obama?
Oh man, that's a tough one. I'm not going to ask that one. We did ask a bunch of NBA players if they would dunk on Dr. King, and so some of them were like, "I'm not dunking, so I'll cross him up and get a three in his face." But I don't know. I think Obama has a little bit of height on Dr. King, and I know that both. Look, that's a tough one. I like to watch that game. I will say I did ask Andrew Young. I said, were you all any good? And we actually used a piece. We actually used a piece of it in the film. He said, "Glenn, when you're doing God's work, we can hit anything from anywhere." And so I love that. I would say that whoever wanted it more on that moment would win between the two.
Nice.
Awesome.
Well, I guess I'll ask our wrap-up questions, our traditional question, because we are called United by Rice. We always ask everyone, what is your favorite rice dish? It could be your favorite rice dish of the moment, of your entire life. Noodles, rice noodles count as well.
Ooh, that's a tough one. Well, first of all, it's tough because I'm super nerdy. I'm working on lowering my A1C.
Oh, you have to cut back on white rice.
And the doctor's like, "No, right." I'm like, "What are you talking about?"
Oh no.
I don't know. We have a family fried rice recipe, which I would say it's not. It's probably not the best tasting food, but it's the one that my daughters cook and my whole family shares, and my parents. So there's a family fried rice recipe
Ooh.
that is sort of a East LA kind of ghetto fried rice.
Nice.
But I would say that's for emotional and community values.
Yeah. Nice.
Perfect.
That's
Very good, sir.
awesome. The kind of family fried rice.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Hoops, Hopes, and Dreams comes out January 19th on Hulu. We're very excited.
Yay.
Thank you all. Appreciate you.
Of course.
See ya.